It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Are we hurtling towards catastrophe? An economic disaster is fast coming down the pipeline and nobody seems to be paying it very much attention. NATO are exploding rockets in war games 70 kilometers from the Russian border. Trump has rejected Iran's peace plan and a massive US military buildup is underway in the Middle East. In other news, Keir Starmer is about to lose 75% of all of his councillors across the United Kingdom. So it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. It's all coming up in the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. Let's start with the unimportant news first. The Labour government is set to lose not more than 1,000 councillors, as I rashly predicted here a week or two ago, but nearly 2,000 councillors on the current opinion polls. 75%. The governing party is poised to lose 75% of all their elected representatives in the United Kingdom. And for Labour MPs desperate to avoid fag-ash flow as the alternative, the Woodbine Wendy of Angela Rayner, well, Andy Burnham has a cunning plan, but I'm not sure he's thought it all through, Andy, if you get my drift. But far more importantly, the President of the United States, in between posting pictures of himself crucified on a cross with a crown of thorns around his head, combining idolatry, blasphemy and sacrilege all in one social media post, well, he has rejected Iran's carefully crafted 15-point peace plan, whereby peace would be restored to the Persian Gulf, stability, equilibrium, and security for all would be guaranteed. Is not good enough for me, said Donald Trump on his way to an aircraft, presumably en route for Mar-a-Lago. Well, we don't know if he means it, but if he means it, it means that the war is about to begin again. And all the logistic movements seem to suggest that that is so. The Iranians are mobilizing their fast fleet of Royal Navy vessels, were royal when the Shah was in power at least, and those naval vessels that, well, Trump said he'd sent to the bottom of the ocean are there in profusion, and they move pretty fast, and they can hit big warships and aircraft carriers almost at will without any danger of interdiction. All plans for a land invasion of Iran are presumably on hold. There are simply not enough soldiers for such a thing to be remotely feasible. But a renewal of missile and bomb attacks against Iran will bring a full-scale war. Iran has promised this, and most plausibly, thank you very much. They've said that any military action, any, however limited, will be treated as full-scale war. And the retaliation against American targets, American warships, what remains of American interests in the Persian Gulf area will be immediately and massively attacked, as will the auxiliary of the United States. The apartheid state of Israel better be bracing itself for a renewal of boom, boom, Tel Aviv, because that will definitely be coming. And then there's the economic shock, which, even if the fighting were not to resume, has sent an economic tsunami down the pipe, down the straits, down the Gulf, and soon across the whole world. And the amazing thing is that this is not the top of the news agenda. The top of the news agenda in Britain is Keir Starmer allowing the Israel Defense Force to patrol certain streets in Britain. No, I'm not making that up. The main news ought to be that all economic life in Western countries and many Eastern countries may soon effectively cease. It's $150 a barrel right now. If the Straits of Hormuz are still closed by the end of May, we will be in a 1930s style recession. $150 a barrel compared to the opening price before this war began. Do the maths, as the Americans say. Andrew Neil, the sage British economic and political commentator, was making the point on social media just yesterday that this could bring down several European governments, to which I answer, hallelujah. There is no escape from this without the bringing down of several European governments. And I'm just hoping that the British government is one of them. Yet no one is talking about it. It's simply invisible as a news item on the agenda at this point in time. Yet we have never lived through such times ever before. Sure, the oil price quadrupled in the 1970s, and it's only doubled right now, but it will more than double by the end of the month. But in any case, oil was $20 a barrel when it quadrupled. Now it's $150. And gas will soon be unavailable. Now, they're hoping for a long, hot summer, but I don't know about you. In most European countries, the long, hot summer doesn't last long enough, and it isn't hot enough. We'll soon be in dire need of energy, and we simply don't have it. And that which is there, we simply can't afford it. People are already being laid off. Thousands of jobs in iconic companies are already lost. Sprite Airways, Delta has asked for a $2.5 billion bailout. Russell and Bromley, one of the most iconic brands on the British high street, has just closed, making hundreds of British workers, many of them highly skilled artisans, redundant. big names, big job losses are on the way, and nobody in the political class has any idea what to do about it. In fact, its key reasons are being doubled down upon. What are those key reasons? First of all, the effective support by European governments of Donald Trump's war in the Middle East. His war against Gaza, his war against Lebanon, his war against Iran. They can huff and puff and chortle as long as they like, but their bases are being used daily in the course of the build-up. Their German bases, their English bases are all indispensable for the American war effort in the Middle East. So don't claim that you're against it. Don't claim, like Merz did, that it doesn't seem to have any plan, any worked out exit, no off-ramp. If you are a key part of the aggression, don't complain when the backwash begins to sweep away your companies. They are guilty of their breach of relations with Russia. Why do you have no gas? You have no gas because we banned Russian gas, even though we were dependent on it for decades. And that dependence was entirely hiccup-free. We were receiving with absolute clockwork regularity and at a cheap price reserves of Russian gas, which kept our economies flowing, and the German economy, the king of the European continent. That's all now history. We've banned all economic contact with Russia, and it hasn't harmed Russia. I can assure you, if you'd been out with me in the blazing sunshine in Moscow today, you would be amazed at the prosperity that is on view. It's not on view in your town or city. It's not on view in your capital. It's not on view in your country. And you know it. These boomerangs that we keep throwing at Russia are coming back and hitting only us. They're guilty of the cardinal sin of placing the needs and wishes of Israel over the needs and wishes of their own people. Can anyone doubt that? Have you seen the police in action in Germany? Have you seen the courts in action in Britain? Have you seen the way in which our entire way of life is being completely, utterly distorted, contorted to protect and defend the interests of a country of 9 million people, thousands of miles away on the Mediterranean, whose behavior is so outrageous that the mass of the general public has walked away from them. Now only those who are paid to do so, only those who are the most fanatic zealots signed up decades before are defending the indefensible. Ben Gvir, the murderer, was given a birthday cake by his own wife, which was a gallows, which was a noose on his own birthday cake. The outrageousness of Israel's conduct, destroying convents, destroying churches, smashing icons of Jesus himself on camera, spitting on pilgrims and priests, nuns being smashed to the ground by settlers in the old city of Jerusalem on camera. Not to mention what they're doing to the rest of the Palestinian population. No one will put up with it anymore. Everyone has walked away from that now. But the political class have not. They're ready to stop anybody. They're ready to ban anything. The British government is preparing to ban Palestine marches except once a year, irrespective of what's going on between the anniversary. The British government has given permission for Israeli forces to assist in the protection of Jewish places of worship and importance here in Britain. What kind of sovereignty is that? Now, make no mistake about this. Anti-Semitism is real. It's vile. It's potentially fatal. I'm ready to pay any price to protect our British Jewish minority, and all minorities for that matter. But when you're taking actions that can only increase the amount of anti-Semitism in the country, you are falling into a gigantic trap. And that's what the British media and the British political class are doing. When you question somebody about their fingernail in the Palestinian colours, like they did to my own wife at a London airport, when you invite separate Jewish policing, when you back a country which falsely claims to be acting on behalf of all Jews, you are multiplying the number of people who hate Jews. Now, I know all the semantics. What's a Semite? How can a so-and-so be an anti-Semite? And the Ashkenazis are not Semites, and so on. I know all of that. Trust me. There's nothing you can teach me about that. I'm defining anti-Semitism as hatred of Jews. Okay? Hatred of Jews exists in this country of Britain, in America, in European countries, everywhere, in Arab, African, South American countries. Yes, of course, it exists. And the more atrocities that are carried out by a state calling itself the state of all the Jews, the more hatred of Jews there will be. We have to fight it. We have to defend the people who may fall victim to it. But when you change the entire nature of your own country to suit Netanyahu, you are asking for very grave trouble indeed. Now, I predicted to you a week or two ago that these were Keir Starmer's last days as Prime Minister of Britain. I told you he was caught in a triple lock. The triple lock was the Epstein-Mandelson affair, which has definitely not gone away and will return with a vengeance to the news agenda just as soon as the second of the triple locks is over on Thursday. The local elections on Thursday are going to be an Armageddon for Keir Starmer and his misnamed Labour Party. The current prediction is that 3/4 of all Labour councillors in the entire country are about to lose their seats. That's getting on for 2,000 defeats at the ballot box on Thursday, and all the responsibility of Keir Starmer and his cabinet. The local councillors may or may not be rum individuals, and a remarkable number of them clearly are, but it's Starmer at whom the buck has to stop. And of course, the third of the triple locks is the one that only I am talking about. And that is the 3 Ukrainian rentboys who are alleged by the prosecution to have arsoned the Prime Minister, his properties, and to have targeted him for many months between October and May of last year. They were said to have reconnoitred a simple motor vehicle, reconnoitred a simple back door, a front door of a property no longer in the ownership, in one case, of the Prime Minister, and that they were inveigled into a plot to do so, according to the prosecution, by somebody called El Money. That's right, a Bond villain stroking his pussy and planning these dastardly attacks against the pussy that is our Prime Minister, against Keir Starmer, against his former car, his former properties. What's it all about? You'd think that the ranks of the British media would have been busy for months deep diving into the bowels of this story. They would be if it was anybody else. There would be splashes in the heavyweight newspapers, lurid confessions in the pages of the tabloids. Panorama would have been busy on it. It would have been the biggest story of the year, especially as El Money is being called a Russian-speaking gentleman. Although in the court it was made plain he was talking to the accused in both Russian and Ukrainian, which is no surprise, of course, because all Russians and all Ukrainians speak the same language, although great efforts have been made to persuade you differently. Even Zelensky speaks Russian at home on the pillow, if you get my drift. The truth is that El Money could be anybody. Could be British, could be Russian, could be Ukrainian, or he could be MI6, whose head, of course, is the daughter of people from around these parts. And that's why she has a peculiar animus towards these parts. After all, her antecedents were amongst those who collaborated with the Nazi invasion of the East, which ended 81 years ago, almost exactly. They're preparing here in Moscow for Victory Day. They are determined that people will never be able to forget the collaborators, the partisans, the Wartime Victory Alliance of the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and the USSR and China. They will never allow that to be forgotten, even though our leaders would much rather that you didn't remember it. It's the mother of all talk shows coming up. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Here's the poll this evening. Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? Yes or no? Wow, it's a very big poll with a very one-sided result so far. Let's make it the biggest poll we possibly can. Nearly 35,000 people have voted, and I'm only now announcing it. Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please don't leave this evening without subscribing to my channel. I need to get to 1 million subscribers very urgently indeed. And if you're one of the advance guard, the creme de la creme, you can vote on patreon.com/George Galloway. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Well, Garland Nixon is the coolest cat of them all, the wisest commentator, and my very good friend. He's a radio talk show host and political analyst in the United States of America. Garland, wonderful to see you again. Been too long. Let's start with that question we're asking on the poll. Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? It's beginning to look like it.
Certainly, all the indications are there. There's certainly the military buildup. And if, we know the history of the U.S. and the history of the empire. The motivation is certainly there. One of the things that's interesting is that here in the United States, a number of the mainstream media outlets have begun to openly admit and show the result, openly admit the success that the Iranian missile barrage had against the U.S. assets in the region. They began to show some of the destruction. So I think what we're looking at here is the motivation for our political class and our ruling elite, which is always to be more aggressive, is always to attack more, to go to war more. But their aggressive mentality is running up against their actual limits of power. So, one would think that they, based on their history, that they would, but in the last 10 days of the conflict, the United States lost, that we can count, that we know of, not counting the cover-ups, 17 aircraft. Can the U.S. afford to go back into a conflict where clearly they were losing from a kinetic perspective, not just from a narrative perspective? So the safe bet would be for consistency, which would be yes, but we're also told here that the military is reticent to go back into a conflict that they were not faring very well in.
The build-up we've implicitly agreed is happening. I look at these trackers of aircraft, and it's basically, it's like the Berlin airlift. It's nose to tail U.S. aircraft supplying the Middle East with new weapons. Trump has just said that the Iranian 15-point peace plan is not acceptable to him, and that's on a Sunday before the markets open. He normally sounds as sunny as he can before the markets open. And the Israelis are definitely geared up for a resumption of the conflict, even though they've yet to subdue Gaza, and they certainly haven't subdued Lebanon. They, of course, will not have to do any kinetic fighting if Trump goes back to war with Iran. They'll be expecting your taxpayer and your poor bloody infantry and sailors and airmen and women to do that job for them. It doesn't seem like the plummeting opinion polls and the massive drift away from the Republican Party, or the rise in gas prices, or the rise in the price of oil on the wholesale market, doesn't seem like any of these things has stopped the war drive.
Yes, what we're looking at is a very desperate empire. We can also see that a significant part of this conflict is directed towards China. Maybe one could argue The entire plan here is to, choke China off, and that this is part of the worldwide strategic plan to take out China. So there's a level of desperation here that seems to be motivating our political class to completely ignore the illusion of democracy or of a constitutional republic or whatever you want to call it, that they have come to a point where I think they've just decided, well, number one, President Trump clearly told Americans that he was going to bring peace, and he did the opposite. And I think that our political class now has just decided, we're going to have to ignore the American people. We're going to have to just, completely be out in the open, that this is not any kind of a government that represents the people. And I think as we're seeing in the UK, the move towards repression, the move towards the censorship is an acknowledgement that there is a complete a gulf, not just a fracture, a gulf between what the people want, which is always stability, and which is prosperity. There's a gulf between that and what the leadership wants, which is domination for 1% of the population over the entire world.
Except the American people have yet to speak. The British will speak on Thursday. I can assure you it's going to be a resounding raspberry for our political leaders. But November isn't that far away. I was looking at the current approval ratings for Trump, and even on the headline figure, they are the worst they have ever been. But on the breakdown, approval of his economic policy, approval of the Iran war, approval of his conduct re-inflation, on item after item, I mean, he's down now in the 20s, 20-something%. And in a political system like yours, which is literally binary, where you're either Republican or Democrat, these numbers are catastrophic. Trump could well lose both houses of Congress in November, and then impeachment would really mean something, wouldn't it?
Possibly. But a couple of things. It certainly appears that Donald Trump's position is pretty clear. It's, yes, I lied. Who cares? I'm a lame duck. There's nothing you can do about it. So sorry about that. I mean, he literally said, if I get elected, I will not go to war with Iran. J.D. Vance said, if we are elected, if you vote for Kamala Harris, you're voting for war with Iran. If you vote for us, you won't get a war with Iran. And then they got in and just said, oh, well, too bad. We're in here now, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, on the issue of the midterms, I think there's something else that we have to take into account. Will the Republicans win? Will the Democrats win? Well, the question is, what will the Republicans or the Democrats look like? I think that we need to look very closely at the primaries, which go in full force starting in June, at a time when our economy is probably going to be reeling from extreme gas prices or worse. And I think that there are a lot of challengers out here that basically, from the right, MAGA people who are very, very angry because they didn't get what they voted for. Certainly some people who would be aligned like, lefties like a me or a Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald kind of people that are that are traditional lefties and that don't go along with the neoliberal so-called left. And I think that more so than what happens in November, we should keep an eye on these primaries because, I mean, just a few people in Congress, particularly if the Democrats, let's say the Democrats have a very short or a very small majority. If there are 3 or 4 people in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party that are aligned against external wars and excessive spending on some of these things, it could really make a difference. So let's keep an eye on the primaries because they could be more consequential than even what happens ultimately in November.
The Democrats are gung-ho against war with Iran, although Vance was probably right that if Kamala had got in, they would have gone to war with Iran. They're gung-ho against the Iran war, but they are deeply critical of Donald Trump not being gung-ho about war with Russia. Has Russia just disappeared off the agenda?
Well, it appears right now that as far as for the American people, they're concerned with what's happening with our economy. And the Democrats, if you kind of read the things that they're saying, it's a tepid attack on Donald Trump on the Iran conflict. Rarely do they complain about the conflict itself. It's usually Donald Trump didn't come to Congress first, or he didn't ask for enough money, or he's not giving the right justification. So if you look at their complaints, you don't see a lot of "we're just against the war because it's wrong. It's morally wrong and it's a violation of the Constitution." I mean, if they were opposed to this, this is a clear violation of the Constitution, and it would be the easiest thing to act on. And they could promise, if we win in November, we will go after Donald Trump. We will impeach him specifically for constitutional violations. The last time they literally went after him and impeached him because he stopped sending weapons to Ukraine. So we know the party is no longer in any way, shape, or form, if it ever was, is certainly not an anti-war party. And even with the Iran conflict, for the most part, their argument is Benjamin Netanyahu dragged Trump into it, not taking into account the China aspect of it, and certainly that were Benjamin Netanyahu not president and there was someone else, that it still would have happened. To make this thing the politics of personality, to do everything but except say we're opposed to the policies that the Zionists are in favor of. They will never do that because it's not true. So, which is another reason the Democratic, the support for the Democratic Party is just not there. But I think there will be support for opposition. So there are people out here, and hopefully you'll get some of them on your show. Anthony Aguilar, the guy Brian McGinnis who got his arm broke in Congress. These people are literally running for Congress. So we'll see if the Democratic Party if some adjustments can be made. At least an internal battle, some kind of a civil war in the Democratic Party would be nice.
Aguilar was on just a day or two ago. In fact, he announced here that he was in the race for a congressional seat, and we all wish him all the best. It's a bit odd, the Democrats looking to make it all about personalities, because that's definitely one thing they haven't got. I mean, Trump, whatever you think of him, is a personality. He's a deadly upas tree under which nothing can grow and everything dies, but at least he's a big tree. The Democrats seem to lack any kind of focus, any kind of big figure. When I see their leaders, first of all, I'm struck by how old and infirm they are, and how obvious a non-starter they are in any personality contest.
And what we're seeing is the usual kind of woke stuff with the Democrats. Number one, they've got Hakeem Jeffries, who is he's a black member of Congress, who apparently they're planning on pushing him forward to lead Congress. He is not very popular in the black community. The nickname for him now is AIPAC Shakur, so that should tell you how popular he is. But and of course now there seems to be a push for AOC, and now she's being exposed as, to be quite frank, a bit of a dim bulb when she's pushed into a corner. She is certainly very not, she's not light on her feet when it comes to answering tough questions. So the Democratic Party has nothing. They have no charisma. Now, I think it would be a mistake to argue that they have no one in the party with charisma. However, the reality is they don't care about that. The only thing they care about is, will you say the things that we need you to say, and will you follow the policies that our donors need to follow? So they wouldn't look through the party to find the best candidate they could. They would just look through the party to find just some cookie cutout person who will mouth the words that they want mouthed for the people who pay the bills. And all we're going to get is the same thing over and over. They're talking about Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris, the same old names over and over again, which I suspect, since they don't practice democracy, one of those people will end up losing to whoever the Republicans run in 2028.
Yeah, the Rainbow Coalition, the Pussy Hats, vanguard of the Democratic Party, is likely the beneficiary of this, but that doesn't play in Peoria. You make the point about AOC. I saw her answering questions just the other day. Seemed like she was walking into the Capitol, as close as you can get to the Capitol nowadays. I mean, talk about a word salad. She used hundreds of words and said absolutely nothing. Talk about not being light on her feet. I think they're in real difficulty that they don't have anybody that could remotely be called a leader.
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, and they're not looking for a leader. You know, that's the sad thing about it. It's not even a party anymore. I mean, we have to remember that in 2016, when the Democrats were sued for fraud because they stole it from Bernie, before they stole it again in 2024, before they just named someone out of the, in 2020, and then named someone out of the blue in 2024. So the last 3 elections in a row, there has been no remnants of democracy in the Democratic Party. But they literally argued in court that they did not have to practice democracy. They argued in court that they could go into a smoke-filled back room and name someone, which they could. But even if they could do that, you wouldn't think that they would have the nerve to, in public, to admit it. But they did. So, you know, the Democratic Party, the only thing they have now is to sit on the side and to hope the Republicans are so terrible and are so bad that people will come back to the Democratic Party. That's why I say I'm watching I think it's going to be an interesting time. You know, we had one of the big things that's happening. I think we're having our Bear Stearns moment now. Spirit Airlines just collapsed and went out of business here in the last 2 days. And many people here are looking at it as this, you know, a pre-2008 indicator that, okay, the first airline went down, and here as people start canceling their flights, canceling their vacations, and that's what's going on everywhere here, because people are, you know, there's an instability and people are not planning on spending money. That's the, you know, basically opening salvo of a massive economic downfall. And, you know, I have to add this as far as an economic downfall. In 2008, it was a banking issue. It was economics. It was in the markets. That's the reason everything collapsed. Then during COVID, everything was shut down. So we physically didn't have things in the supply chain that you could buy, even if you wanted to purchase them. And the industries were shut down. And those were 2 separate economic collapses for different reasons. Well, now we would be looking at both. We would be looking at both an economic collapse and a physical collapse of the supply chains where you couldn't get things, which spells absolute disaster. And it certainly appears as though the current administration is not only not going to do anything to mitigate it, but it seems to be their intent.
Well, the insider trading that's going on, if you've got a cabal running your country who have abandoned any notion of the national interest and have merely become a tribal or even a small clan interest, this is what you would have. Spirit Airline is one thing. Delta has just asked for a $2.5 billion bailout. They've cancelled hundreds of flights today. They say for staff shortages, but nobody believes that. You're right, we're not talking about just a banking crisis. We're talking about an industrial crisis and a banking crisis at the same time. I mean, you and I, if we live long enough, we could see a revolution in America.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, the thing we have to keep in mind is that they've been telling us for years that this is the intent. You know, one of the things that's happened recently is that the United States, it's being reported here, that the U.S. has made some kind of a deal with Indonesia so they could get military overflight permission, which is where the Malacca Straits are. So that means they're planning on choking off China in another trade route. Although right now our military is falling apart and we don't have weapons, so I don't know how we would do that. But the bottom line is, if you think about it, a United States government, a military that says we're going to contain China, we're going to take out the world's industrial plan, industrial power. that means that you're going to drive the world into a severe depression. So they've been telling us all along that the plan was to drive the world into a severe depression so that, a few thousand billionaires in the United States could continue to cash in. And even now, as war is going on, as our own economy is collapsing, they still can't help themselves but to steal everything that's not laid down. Even now, every other day, Trump tweets something about that's going to affect the market, and 5 minutes before he tweets it, there's a crowd of people who seem to have foreknowledge who are investing, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So even as the Titanic is sinking, they're still running from room to room to see if they can steal some diamonds before they die in the icy waters. These people they can't possibly accept the reality that their devious and diabolical plots to rule the world are not going to work. But it's obvious to everyone else.
And yet he's on his way to China. At the same time, he's packing for China right now. And Besant says he's not going to cancel this time. And yet he's insulting China with every other breath. He said, I think yesterday or the day before, that China has neither the courage nor the will to unblock the Straits of Hormuz. China's answer, of course, was unanswerable. The Straits of Hormuz were perfectly open until you started a war, which has closed the Straits of Hormuz, at least to some of the world. I know that he's a New York mafia boss type of businessman. It's the art of the deal and all that. But my knowledge of the Chinese people, and even in part the Chinese government, I don't know many of them, but those that I know, they're not the sort of people that you can behave like a New York hoodlum or a New Jersey gang boss in front of. So I wouldn't be holding out much hope for any grand bargain between the US and China in the upcoming talks.
Well, and I've come to believe that these absurd tweets by and insulting and oftentimes violent, vulgar tweets by Donald Trump have nothing to do with China or Iran. They're internal. Their power moves, their moves of domination internally. They're trying to show the people in the Senate that he's in charge. He's telling us that everything's blown up. Just ridiculous things. The Iranians know that their Navy and their Air Force and all of their military is not blown up, so he can't be talking to them. So what we have now is an administration that militarily does not have the power to dominate. Economically, diplomatically, is flailing, does not have the power to dominate. So the only thing that President Trump can attempt to do is to dominate the narrative, that in the world of narratives, he's the toughest guy, he's winning everything, and everybody has to bow to him. And everywhere else in the world, people are looking at our country and, asking how long before this country falls into almost complete political and maybe even economic and cultural instability, because we are very close. And those tweets or social truths or whatever they are now are, just kind of an internal conversation. He might as well just do them on the intranet in the White House, because even the pundits out here, when they read the latest one over the top and just go, oh yeah, okay, set it aside and go back to trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, he's now increasingly claiming to be the Messiah. I referred in my monologue to just about the most offensive thing I've ever seen any politician post, of himself on the cross with the crown of thorns around his head. They're persecuting me more than they persecuted him, without a capital H. The more you look at it, the more you've got to question the big enchilada. Is this man mentally sound?
Certainly, it does not appear so. The other part of it too, and that brings into the conversation the religious aspect of U.S. policy right now. Recently there was a lot of uproar in the United States, which is ostensibly, I guess, a Christian country, a majority Christian country, we'll call it that. And there was a picture of some Israeli soldiers who had a statue of Jesus. This guy's beating it in the face with a sledgehammer, and that was an interesting metaphor for the Israelis' contempt for the people in the United States and their view of our people of our soldiers as cannon fodder. But there is a very frightening religious aspect to U.S. foreign policy from the perspective of Zionism. And of course, when we look at Pete Hegseth with his crusader tattoos, and every other week now Donald Trump has he has this the holy man complex, it seems, whereas God somehow chose him to change the world. So it's pretty horrifying, but it shows that we don't have a stable government, and this is not a real government. There is no attempt to look at the problems in this country, to look at the needs of the people in this country, and in any way address them. The policies of the United States government now are wholly separated and completely unconnected to the plight of the American people, which they're only making far worse.
Garland Nixon, wonderful to see and hear you again. Are you back on Twitter now? How can people follow you?
Yes, I am back on Twitter. Look for the Garland Nixon. My other account is still there, which is at Garland Nixon, and I pay for both, and both of them have a blue check mark, so I'm one of the few people that have two blue check mark accounts, but I can only access the one that says the Garland Nixon, THE. So I'm back on Twitter, kinda, really.
Wonderful. Garland Nixon, thanks for everything, always. Great to see you again. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to the hour, where we've got the one and only Professor Jeffrey Sachs coming up on the hour. Stay tuned.
The king of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, at this time said something incredible. You can't imagine it being said nowadays by any of these Arab leaders. He said, "You are the ones who can't live without oil. Our ancestors lived on dates, and we can easily go back and live that way."
Yeah, but you can't live without oil, just for completion. Now, there was a man, a real king, a real Arab, a real Muslim, King Faisal, who quadrupled the price of oil to the Westerners who needed it, in defense of the Palestinian people, in opposition to the settler apartheid state of Israel and its land grabs. How different. I've never admitted this to you, but I was actually well old enough to remember that historical fact that you have just cited. And I was, in fact, quite prominent politically at that very moment. And I wrote about it in my audiobook, Street Fighting Man, in some detail. So I'm bitterly aware of how the Arab world in 1973 has declined as I look at the pitiful performance of the Arab leaders who can only convene to denounce Iran for retaliating to a massive American and Israeli attack upon themselves, but couldn't lift a finger even to deliver bread to the starving Palestinians in Gaza.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? Yes or no? Vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on Patreon. Let's go straight to Joseph in Liverpool. My commiserations, Joseph, if you're a Liverpool supporter, but you want to talk about much more important things, I know, the American troops in Iran. On you go.
Good evening, George. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the good work you've done. I pride myself in learning and reading about history, but I have to admit I've learned so much about from you than all the lessons I've had in school, and I'm quite sure there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that can also say the same thing. Now, there's this video that came across.
It's very kind of you to say that, Joseph, and many people say that to me, which makes me proud because I left school to become a factory worker. I've never been to university. I have no degrees. Everything I know, I was taught in the University of Life. And if I'm now doing that as a teacher to others, then I think my life has been well spent. Joseph, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's two videos I've come across that 3 weeks ago, it's coincidentally happens to sort of align with the poll for today. I mean, if this poll was up 3 weeks ago, I would have said there wouldn't be the war starting. But when I came across this video, I am now inclined to believe that this war is just going to kick off again, and it's going to be worse than when it started. Now, I don't know whether you've seen the video, so that's why I called, just in case you've come across it and you could share some more light on that, whether they are true or not. So first one was about a reverend minister in U.S. who was preaching in his church, and what he said is that so far there have been 500 U.S. soldiers killed and over 2,000 injured. Now, the government has done so well to hide it from the American people that they've moved these dead and the injured to Frankfurt so that nothing goes out. Now, I served in the British Army. I've been to the U.S. base in Frankfurt. I think it's the biggest outside of the U.S., and it's a whole city within the city. So that is possible to do that without even the ordinary or the average soldier knowing this is what is going on. The second video was about a gentleman talking about two U.S. naval ships. I don't know whether they are carriers or destroyers. One is the USS Nimitz that have been sunk. These are not been hit also. They've been completely sunk. And when you add these two, I think that is going to give Trump and Hegseth an opportunity to kickstart this war, because I strongly believe they will start this war again, and then those 500 people dead that they've been able to keep a tight lid on, they will ramp up the figure and present that to the American people, in which they will say, well, the ordinary American person is going to say, if they've killed 500 of us, then we're giving you our blessings to go on with that war. What is your view on that, and have you come across these videos?
Well, I haven't seen the videos, but the Nimitz is acknowledged to have been hit and is headed for home, they say. I have no doubt at all that hundreds of American personnel have been killed and that thousands have been wounded. I've seen the satellite pictures of what happened to all these American bases in the region. They were, each and every one of them, completely destroyed. Now, I knew this at least 2 or 3 weeks before CNN knew it, or at least CNN told everybody else about it, as they have now done. CNN has now acknowledged the extraordinary levels of damage and the cost in materiel, radars, and other sophisticated equipment, costing hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's thought that the U.S. financial losses are in excess of $1.5 billion. Their human resource losses, I have no doubt that they are concealing. And if there is a broader, more general conflagration, then they'll, as it were, forgive me putting it this way, toss these dead bodies into a general figure of people that will be lost in an all-out war. I've got no doubt about that. I've got no doubt that the American media will tell us about that, because if I know it, they surely know it. But it's an odd idea that you reinforce failure. Garland Nixon said the U.S. lost 17 warplanes in just the last 10 days of the war. And we've seen footage of those that were lost on the ground near Isfahan, and we've seen the footage of American jets demonstrating their total air superiority by being shot down by Iranian missiles and by Chinese and Russian anti-aircraft warfare assets. So it's a strange thing that when the war has gone so badly for you, you want to double down and take a risk that everything will exponentially go wrong. Now, I'm so old. I'm celebrating the 51st anniversary of the great victory of the Vietnamese people, and I celebrated it in real time. I'm so old that I danced around my living room as I saw the American empire hastily retreat, if that's the word, clattering off the rooftop of their embassy in Saigon. I'm so old that I remember the tanks smashing in the gates of the US Embassy and of the South Vietnamese presidency. I'm so old I remember Big Min surrendering to the People's Army, the NVA, and the National Liberation Front. I'm so old I have a Viet Cong flag from that exact time, one that was waved from the balcony of the United States Embassy. Does Donald Trump not watch the History Channel? I suspect that he doesn't. In fact, we know he watches the Gorilla Channel, and we know that he talks to the gorillas, gets on his haunches in front of the screen and talks to the gorillas. This we know from people whose job it was to be present in the room in the White House. So maybe when someone is so detached, unhinged from real life with real consequences, maybe we can expect a resumption of the war. We'll see what the one and only Professor Jeffrey Sachs says in just a couple of minutes. An academic superstar, a bit of a superman actually. Jeffrey Sachs coming up in just a minute. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe. If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the Moats team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official Moats graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a Moats graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a Moats graduate at £10 a month as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is. And you can receive official Moats legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, you've got 40 minutes to vote on the poll. Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? Yes or no? Vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or if you're in the Vanguard, on patreon.com/George Galloway. And keep your calls coming in because I know from previous experience that our next guest will be as thought-provoking as any guest in the whole wide world could be. He is the academic superstar. He is the man in demand, and he's kindly agreed To join us again, it is Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor, there's so much I'd like to talk to you about, but let me start with the kinetics, as our friend Garland Nixon put it just half an hour ago on the show. The kinetics look like they're about to restart. The kinetics of military power that is being resupplied, built up at a rate of knots. The pieces are all in place, and Trump has rejected the Iranian peace plan. So my first question, is the war about to restart in your opinion?
Probably so. Probably so. As insane as it is, nothing good, of course, has come from anything that's happened up until now. And anything that follows with more war will be disastrous. We've already seen that the United States and Israel cannot achieve anything positive, even for their own objectives, much less for the world. And yet, it is likely that it's going to start again. There are some specific issues of timing. Trump's supposed to be in China in just a short time, in about 2 weeks. Does he want to go with a disastrous war? Maybe even the meeting again would not happen in those circumstances. So he's got other things on his mind, but everything points to a resumption of fighting because Trump is that stupid.
You see, I was schooled, not formally, but informally schooled, in the belief that great men don't make history, that history follows a more scientific path. Maybe I was taught wrongly, but that's what I was taught. And yet this war seems to be entirely dependent on the personality of Donald Trump. He's not a great man, of course, but he is a big man. And he is a man with a great deal of power right now at this historic moment. Because the markets can't want a war. The oil market can't want a war. Industry can't want a war. The economic captains of our industrial heartlands and so, they cannot want a war. We're told the American officer class doesn't want a war. And so if there is a war, it seems to rest on the tortured, fevered speculation and social media ramblings and so on of one individual. How can that be?
Well, at first, there are two crazy individuals here. There's Trump and there's Netanyahu. They're both nuts. They're both pathological liars. They are both psychopaths, actually, meaning that they kill and they inflict harm without any remorse, actually any normal human emotion, I would say. So we have two, folie à deux, as the psychiatrists call it, and they play off of each other. Israel definitely wants this war to restart. They say so without any equivocation. The Minister of War in Israel, the Minister of Defense, says, yes, the war should start again. This is Israel's dream that the United States military will defeat Iran so that Israel can have military hegemony throughout the Middle East and West Asia. So they're egging this on. Then there are parts of our corporate military industrial complex definitely egging this on. Strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, in Silicon Valley, which has become basically the heartland of the new military industrial complex. George, they want to test their new weapons. They want to test their AI systems. They want to test their drones. They want to test an AI-enabled battleground. And I mean it in a literal sense. You can't have all those weapons developed without trying them. It's not good enough to do a simulation We want to see how many people can be killed, whether you can really control the airspace, whether you can really do AI-based targeting. Yeah, you kill some schoolgirls, but come on, this is all in the process of learning. So Palantir is our most visible part of the military-industrial complex now, but every major AI big tech company is deeply engaged with the Pentagon now. They want this war because it's business, but more than that, it's improving their models. It's improving their future contracts. It's demonstrating what can be done. And so I think a lot of the Pentagon, maybe not the ones that have to command troops, but a lot of the Pentagon that's interested in procurement, that's interested in technology, wants this war to continue. Then, of course, we have the individual personalities, and you raise a very important question. Do individuals make a difference? Well, when there are systems, the answer is no, not so much. But we have completely broken all rational systems in the United States. And by that I mean the actual processes of decision making are quite exposed right now, and they rest with Trump. It's weird, but it's not an exaggeration. We know a lot about how this war started on February 28th. Netanyahu and the head of Mossad came and gave a bullshit story to Trump. Trump was a fool enough to buy it or to go along with it, given his range of pressure points and interests and delusions. Everyone else in this small room basically thought it was nuts, except for Hegseth, who's an absolute blooming idiot right alongside Trump. And so the Pentagon chief of staff, not interested. CIA thought it was a bad idea. The vice president of the United States openly has said this is a bad idea. Rubio, completely worthless, a joke, unfortunately. We don't have any diplomacy. Susan Wiles, chief of staff, I don't know if she played a role. Jared Kushner, come on. And Steve Witkoff, that's the team. We're not talking about an interagency process. We're not talking about intelligence estimates. We're not talking about a plan. We're not talking about the President of the United States consulting with congressional leaders. We're not talking about American public opinion, which runs overwhelmingly against everything that is happening. So we're talking about a few people led by a delusional old man who never was very good at anything, but is very bad at this. And even in the room of sycophants that he has, no one believed it except perhaps Hegseth, who is his own special case in all of this. So there's no process. This is a case where an individual can make decisions. He violates the Constitution because the Constitution says in the United States under Article 1 that it's only Congress that can declare war. But most presidents have ignored that. Trump completely, brazenly, and almost, no members at all of Trump's own party in the Republican leadership murmur even a word about consultation, much less congressional constitutional responsibility. Netanyahu's his own case. He's a very, very dark, pathological figure. I've called him a son of a bitch in the past, and feel that that's a mild description for a mass murderer, actually. So this is what we have. We do not have a either rational leadership or a rational process in, I think, either country, the U.S. Or Israel. Israel, well, actually, both countries add a strain of religious zealotry, which is also pretty strange in the year 2026 for two nuclear-armed countries. But it's not an incidental part of this story also. Certainly not in the Israeli case, even if that's just part of a political coalition. It's two of the three leaders in Israel are messianic zealots who read from a genocidal account of Israel's conquest of Canaan in the book of Joshua and take that as a literal text for what Israel should be doing right now. The United States sent an ambassador to Israel, Mr. Huckabee, who says out loud exactly that he agrees with that approach. So this is another aspect of the irrationality that we're facing.
Peculiarity indeed, and unlucky we are to be alive at this moment. Maybe we won't be for very much longer.
Well, we want to stay alive.
We want to stay alive. Our friend Tucker Carlson, a not inconsiderable man, said today that spending a day with Donald Trump is peculiarly intoxicating. He seems to have a kind of spell that creates an atmosphere around him. And before you know it, he said, I wouldn't know, I've never smoked marijuana, but he said it's a bit like being under the influence of marijuana. A day on the hash is how he described a day with Donald Trump. I don't know if you recognize that. I would have thought myself, looking from the far outside, that Donald Trump is a vulgar bore. He certainly wouldn't mesmerize me. But if he could mesmerize someone as considerable as Tucker Carlson, maybe I've judged him wrongly.
Well, I've never been with Trump, and certainly watching him from the outside, he's deeply pathological. I agree with a very long list of distinguished psychologists and psychiatrists that say he has the so-called dark triad personality of narcissism, of psychopathy, of megalomania. He has been called by very important forensic psychologists and psychiatrists a malignant narcissist, which was a term invented for Hitler. Hitler had a charisma too, to use Max Weber's sociological idea. He attracted followers. Some of the sickest people in German society of the day. And Trump attracts people too. He has a following. The following is a minority of Americans. Most Americans find Donald Trump repulsive. His approval rating right now is, according to the latest Ipsos Reuters poll, 34% approval, and I believe it's 62% disapproval. And when the disapprovals are queried, it's strong disapproval for most of those disapprovals. In other words, most Americans find Donald Trump repulsive, actually, not charismatic. This is important. He is doing what he's doing not because of American jingoism, not because American society is calling for it, not because of selling a story of glory to the American people. He's doing this as a one-person act, or two-person act if you count Netanyahu in this. And Americans are deeply against this. But to come back to your opening question, if he actually goes forward, I think the point that many people have been telling Trump, which is that within a couple of weeks of such a decision, the world could be irreparably damaged, is really the point for us. Because the next round of fighting, if there is going to be one, and it looks likely, will lead to massive destruction of the physical infrastructure of the whole Gulf region. And no doubt Iran has all of its targets set. And they will aim to show, as best they can, deterrence. And they have thousands of missiles left, and it doesn't take much to knock out desalination plants, oil and gas fields, refineries, ports, pipelines, civilian infrastructure linked to all of that. It could happen in hours or days, which is why there was a pause in the first place. This is a losing story. This is a disaster. Nothing was accomplished by the fighting, and Trump was forced in a way to understand that, even if he doesn't accept that. Nothing was accomplished. And we sit here now with the oil prices at about $115 a barrel. If the shooting resumes, it will soar. That will look like nothing compared to what will come in a resumption of a shooting war. But even at $115 a barrel, which is at least a 50% increase of oil prices from what they were on February 27, before the war started, this is already creating grave economic harms all over the world. But what will happen if the shooting starts again will make what's happened to date look insignificant.
Indeed, I wanted to move on to that field, leaving the Gulf itself for a minute. We'll come back to it, and going downstream. Downstream, where I live, or at least ordinarily live, in Britain, in Europe, it's difficult to overstate the catastrophe that is coming down that pipeline, down that strait towards us. We are already in the apparently gravest economic difficulty, and I'm thinking that economic life as we know it will effectively cease across much of Europe. If we are talking of oil at $150 to $200 a barrel, or maybe unavailable at all, well, certainly any factory I've ever worked in will have to cease its activity, and the economy in general will simply seize up for want of the greatest essentials. Agriculture is already in crisis, even in your country, because the fertilizer that comes down the Strait of Hormuz also. There are many things, not just oil, gas, fertilizer, minerals, so many things will simply cease to be available, and the supply chain will be completely broken, won't it?
Of course, we will have a catastrophic outcome. And if, unlike the previous disruptions to oil supplies from this region, which were famous in the 1970s, one after the 1973 war, and one after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, those were huge negative shocks to the world economy, which were disruptive for years and in some ways through debt crises for decades to come for some countries. But what happened then was a temporary closing of the spigot. What would happen now, most likely within 2 or 3 weeks, is a destruction of the spigot itself that could not be replaced for 5, 10 years of physical rebuilding. And even then, the investments that would be needed to do that and the perilous nature of such investments after just having been blown up would put everything in doubt. So we're talking about something that has not happened since World War II. And I think the crisis that would come within a short period of time would be comparable to, let me put it a different way, would be larger than anything that has happened since the Second World War, all of the big crises that we've had. And what happens, as you know, is not only would, of course, the economies be deeply disrupted, but then come the financial crises that follow, because all of the outstanding lending and borrowing and investments that have come have been predicated on a completely different set of assumptions from the ones that would prevail. So there would be bankruptcies galore. Our governments will find the interest costs on massive debts that they have accumulated over the last 20 years soaring. This will create currency crises. This will create banking crises. Only a complete ignoramus and idiot would restart the fighting again. But as I said, it's likely. This is the paradox right now. It's likely that absolutely the dumbest imaginable thing one could do is actually odds on.
Now, I said we'll come back to the Gulf, and I promise we will, but I'm interviewing you now from Moscow, where preparations are heavily underway for the Victory Day celebration, parade, and so on. I attended the Victory Museum the other day, and I made the point when I was coming out that the Victory Museum, that Russophobia does not survive a visit to the Victory Museum. The cost of the World War II to the people of this part of the world was, of course, greater than any other, and the contribution.
Yes, and by the way,
to the defeat
and the shame of it that we in the United States or in Britain or in continental Europe are so nasty not to recognize that fact that the Soviet Union lost 27 million people defeating Hitler and bore the brunt of it, and then would not even show up to the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Hitler because it was Russia. But Russia defeated Hitler, bearing the vast brunt of the war. And this shows the mindlessness of our countries, actually, of our leadership. How cruel, by the way. Same with China, incidentally. China lost an estimated 14 million people to Japan's invasion. And when China had the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Japan, no Western government would show up. The ingratitude, the lack of the most basic decency and historical knowledge is really something disgusting on our side. And then Trump, because, I mean, I hate to come back to him in this context, but he says, yes, we defeated Hitler and Russia helped. I mean, it just is the cruelty of the stupidity, because there's stupidity, of course, but it's so stupid it becomes absolutely cruel in its stupidity. That's where we are. Anyway, I interrupted you, George. Sorry.
Toxic mix. No, not at all. No, fascinating that you did. I've written a piece for the Chinese media tomorrow because this is the eve of the Tokyo trials, which of course are long forgotten in the West. I suspect even by academics, in which and are never referred to. I mean, the Nuremberg trials aren't referred to all that often, but far more often than the Tokyo trials.
Absolutely.
And all kinds of bizarre things happened in the Tokyo trials. First of all, it was like Hitler being exempted from the Nuremberg trial. Hirohito was exempted and was allowed to live out his life with everyone calling him emperor. The Unit 731 that conducted hideous biological experiments on Chinese prisoners and civilians was allowed to trade the results of those experiments with the Americans in return for their freedom from prosecution. I don't want to give away too much of my
George,
article, but
no, but just incidentally, in the German context, the U.S. hired those very scientists, and the program was called Operation Paperclip, which is refers to the fact that when Nazi scientists were to be brought to the United States, and the State Department was objecting, but the military wanted these scientists because they knew how to torture people, they knew all of these experiments, these absolutely gruesome, grotesque experiments. You'd put a paperclip on their file, and that would tell the State Department, keep your hands off. This is the military or the CIA. We're bringing them in. And this is recounted in an incredible book by a wonderful reporter named Annie Jacobson about Operation Paperclip. So it's the same with Japan. We not only exonerated these scientists, we hired them. They became the head of our military research programs, these Nazi scientists.
Incredible. We're supposed to love Japan now and hate China. And love Germany and hate Russia. For someone my age, that's an impossible ask, actually, having grown up in the shadow of the Second World War as I
And
did.
if I could say something about that, George, could I just add one more word about that, because I feel very strongly about it.
Sure.
I want Japan, which I like. I like many Japanese. I have many friends, colleagues. We've lived in Japan. I want them to say, sorry, we were responsible for killing 14 million people in China, and we have no animus against China. Indeed, we don't want to be divided by the United States in some geopolitical game anymore. I would like Japan and China actually to work together. I would like Germany not to be playing games with, let's say, revanchist or revenge thoughts, which they flirt with right now, and rather say, we're sorry, 27 million dead, and isn't it really time that the Chancellor of Germany and the President of Russia sit down and start again a normal, peaceful, indivisible security for Europe and put the United States out of this? Maybe Trump did, I think he did a favor. I wish Germany would take it up. When Trump said we're withdrawing 5,000 troops, if the German Chancellor had any sense, he would say, take them all home. We don't want to be occupied. It's 81 years since the war ended. And I'm going to go visit my counterpart, President Putin, and we're going to make peace on our continent finally the right way. So instead of the United States siding with the aggressors of World War II against the countries that actually were the allies in World War II, we should, in the United States, get the heck out of both regions, and both regions should understand that their real security comes not from something like NATO, God forbid, or American military bases in Japan. Their real security comes from making peace with their neighbors. That's where security comes from, not from an American military sitting there. And if the Gulf countries had learned that too, they wouldn't be in the disastrous situation they're in right now.
If there's any redeeming feature in Donald Trump, it is that he seems not to want war with Russia for whatever reason. And many speculate on what that reason might be. I have no idea. But I do get the impression he would like the Ukraine war to come to an end, and that it is others who are determined that it should continue. The others being in his own circle, in the Democrats, in the Congress, in the military-industrial complex, and above all, perhaps, in the European governments. Do you think what was established at Alaska, the spirit of Alaska, the spirit of Anchorage in a big full-dress summit between Putin and Trump, is that dead, or does it still have legs?
Well, the problem, among other things, is first the constituency for war in the U.S., in Britain, especially in Britain perhaps, and in Germany, is very strong. And so it would take a highly competent American president to say no and explain why to the American people. Trump is fundamentally incompetent. This is a big part of the story. Trump has never had a coherent explanation to the American public about this issue that we're talking about. There's been no speech to say the war should stop because NATO enlargement wasn't a good idea, or because there could be an alternative security arrangement. He's not smart enough, unfortunately, to give the speech, and he doesn't have anyone around him to write it and put it on the damn teleprompter and get it done. So I think you're right. It was my sense, too, that he didn't want this war to continue. But when he started to say it should stop, then you had on a bipartisan basis in the U.S. Senate, no, the war must go on. We're defending freedom, selling military goods. You had a Democrat like Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut, and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, from the Republican side, demanding war, more war. And then, of course, Britain is the most Russophobic country in modern history. By the way, for no reason. If you go back historically, it's a fascinating phenomenon. British Russophobia, which dates from around 1840. But the British imperial rulers got the idea that Russia was the big threat to the British Empire, and concocted every crazy story about Russians passing through the Khyber Pass to invade the Indian subcontinent. And they concocted the Crimean War in 1853, Lord Palmerston, all with Russophobia. Well, that Russophobia has continued actually until today. And someone as incompetent as Starmer, and it's a long list of incompetence, they're all Russophobic. And Merz, come on, if you're a German chancellor, are you kidding? Do you have any understanding of the right kind? That you have a certain responsibility to actually address this issue from a historical and a realistic point of view. Germany had such chancellors with Willy Brandt and Helmut Schmidt and Helmut Kohl. And Angela Merkel got it, but she was too weak. She was bowled over in the end by the American presidents. But basically, this guy is unreal. I don't know where I got to on this rant, except that the Russophobia is so blinding, and it's for Britain. It's been, I know where we were. It's been 180 years. I was going to mention, by the way, there was a wonderful book written in 1950, which I had the chance to read a few years ago, which I discovered only a few years ago, by a historian who asked the question, where did this Russophobia come from? And he posed the question. He said, in 1815, Britain and Russia were allies against Napoleon. And then 25 years later, Britain was a staunch Russophobic country. And Russia had done nothing. So what happened? Where did it come from? So he read everything, every speech in the parliament, every magazine article, and so forth. And the conclusion of the book, no reason. It just was invented. And it was basically this confabulation of Russia as the great medieval, oriental, eastern threat to the British Empire. And it's continued for 180 years since then. Now, you asked me about Trump. He was not strong enough, knowledgeable enough, capable enough to be a good president, which would require skill, actually, to manage this. The president would have to speak over the heads of the military-industrial complex to the American public, to explain to them this war made no sense. It should stop. It could stop. Russia's not going to invade Western Europe. That's not the issue. But we don't have to put NATO into Ukraine, because that's a provocation that we wouldn't like if Russia tried to establish a military base in Mexico, or when they tried in Cuba, the world almost ended because we said that's a cause for war. So if a president explained this straightforwardly when he came into office, the war would be over. But he's not capable of this. And no one around him is capable of that modest maneuver. And so I think on the Russian side, they have basically lost interest. They don't believe anything good can come out of Washington. President Putin has a very famous interview in Figaro in 2017 where he said, at that point, he said, I've dealt with 3 American presidents. They come into office with ideas, but then men in dark suits with briefcases and blue ties come to tell them the way that it really is, and then you never hear of those ideas again. And I think Putin really nails it with that the American system is a military-industrial complex. Europe surprised me, frankly, at how enthusiastic it was to double down on this in a kind of economically suicidal way, and perhaps even a militarily suicidal way in the future. But that's where we are, and I don't think the Russians give any serious thought to negotiated outcomes at this stage. I think they're just trying to achieve their military aims at this point, and are not expecting Trump to do anything useful in that.
Well, Putin will be making a major speech here on Victory Day on May the 9th. And Peskov, his press spokesman, said just a couple of hours ago that this is going to be an extremely important speech. So whether it's a speech that will point us one way or the diametric opposite way, we'll have to wait and see. One thing I can say, I don't know what a day with Donald Trump is like. I can't imagine he'd mesmerize me, but you, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, are absolutely mesmerizing as a guest, and I'm grateful to to you for joining us.
George,
Professor
so great to be
Jeffrey
with you.
Sachs.
Anytime you ask, George, it's such a pleasure, and thank you for all that you do.
God bless
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, Professor Sachs, Professor of Economics at Columbia University. How lucky are they in Columbia University to have his time in the lecture theatre? Let me take a quick break and then a call from Manchester. And you no idea how important that can be. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I'm calling time on the poll, just short of 40,000 votes cast. Will Trump and Netanyahu restart the Iran war? Well, I'm afraid that in all portals, more than 90% say yes. And in Patreon, well, the smartest people are to be found. It's 100% say yes. Let's go to Loris in Manchester, a very special, holy, sacred place for me, particularly on match day at Old Trafford, where we had quite a triumph today. Loris, welcome.
Hi, George. Great show. Thank you for having me on. Congratulations on the result.
Welcome.
That's saying a lot coming from a Liverpool fan.
Okay, thanks.
Currently, there is a European Political Community Summit in Armenia, Yerevan, and what's ignored is the plight of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, to give it its Armenian name. Just to give you a bit of context for the benefit of everyone, there's an enclave of territory between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which has been home to Armenians going back many years and back throughout history. In recent years, due to conflict, and the most recent one in 2023, the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh was forced out of their ancestral land with often times violent force. Since then, there has been a peace, but desecration of Armenian cultural heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh, the destruction of Armenian artifacts and the detention of POWs. I myself come from Armenian heritage, and I like to bring this to the attention of the audience, as what's happened to the Armenians of Karabakh is tragic. I mentioned this as just over a week ago marked the anniversary of the Armenian genocide, a tragedy which has often been attempted to be suppressed by Turkey and its ally Azerbaijan. Pan-Turkish imperialism has played quite a destructive role in this region, costing many lives of all different ethnicities, and it seems history does repeat itself, unfortunately.
Well, some of my best friends are Armenian, and I'm invited to speak in Yerevan quite soon, actually, and I'm giving consideration to whether I can do that, at which point I'll have more to say than I've got time to say right now, Loris, but the Gayatri and I attended the Armenian Cathedral in Tehran, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, late last year, and there was a big exhibition in the Armenian Cathedral of the horrors of the Armenian genocide, which continues to be denied in certain quarters, and even where not denied, considerably played down compared to other genocides. Well, it will never be played down by me. The Armenian people suffered the most grievous and savage genocidal mass murder, in many ways a precursor to the Holocaust of the 1930s and 40s. The Armenian people were, in a way, a trial run for those with genocidal intent. And I'll definitely be saying that and much more, Loris, if and when I go to Yerevan to give this talk. It's quite a high-powered invitation, and I'm minded to accept it. Just one or two details to be fixed and arranged. Thanks very much for that call. Sorry, there's not a great deal of time to diversify to another dreadful genocidal conflict, that against the Armenian people. But thanks for the call. Multi-Tom says they will restart the war because both are trying to stay out of jail. A very sound point. Ian McKillop, 1774, says yes and no, Trump won't, Netanyahu will. And Serena Mandel says free Tiago and safe now. This is a reference to the repeated acts of piracy committed by the settler state of Israel, which just in the last 48 hours saw yet another boarding of a peaceful convoy bringing aid, hoping to bring aid to the people of Gaza, which was brutally stopped by the Israeli armed forces, and the prisoners taken to Crete, which the last time I looked was a part of Greece rather than Israel. And yet these people are being held hostage and put on trial as a result of never having got anywhere near the Israeli coast. It's a quite extraordinary example of extraterritoriality, which we're used to the Americans exercising, but it now seems that Israel can exercise within the territory of the European Union. This is Tiago Avila, and you can see in his face he's been tortured. This is a peaceful man, a regular guest on our show, seized in Greek waters, beaten and tortured and held in Greece by Israel. I'm not an expert on exactly how this state of affairs came about, and we had and will try to get Tiago on, assuming he's allowed to leave this illegal incarceration in which he is now held. Blackbird 5634 says Trump said if I voted for Kamala Harris there would be higher gas prices, inflation and war with Iran. I voted for Kamala Harris and all those things came true. Tam McIntosh says according to Fox News, Iran is so desperate they are preparing to use dolphins with bombs strapped to them. Indeed, Fox News has accused 5 different countries in the last 2.5 years of preparing to use dolphins with bombs strapped upon them. And Mole says a gorilla would do a better job as president. Free bananas for all. There's a legend on the line, all the way in Oklahoma. It's May, and she wants to talk about the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Go ahead, May. I'm all ears.
Hey, May. Hey, George. How are you doing? It's good to talk to you. Thank you for taking my
And
call.
you, my
I
dear.
appreciate it. I have a request, and I have two epiphanies I wanted to share. About Keir Starmer, I just wanted to mention that I appreciate your support. There's some questions about him on Trump's Magic 8 Ball on Facebook. And I want to encourage your listeners and your followers to come and ask their own questions, and we'll put them to the 8 Ball and then make comments. But one of my followers said, Keir Starmer is what will bring down Keir Starmer. And I thought that was hopeful, and I hope it's true.
Absolutely.
Now, my two epiphanies.
It's true.
I actually got, while listening to your university today, one of the little break ads that you had on was Gayatri talking about King Faisal. And it made me realize that the first time I ever heard of King Faisal was in the Lawrence of Arabia movie. And the second time I ever heard of him was on your show. We have a problem in the United States. The reason Americans tend to go along with so much stupidity is because we're ignorant. We don't study the great people of other countries, of other cultures, of other times. We don't study anything but our own crap. And most of it is lies. So I want to encourage all the parents and grandparents of the United States, and perhaps every other country that's listening, we must push our schools to talk about other cultures. We must learn about other people, because if we understand about them, then it will be a lot harder to get us to want to kill them. The reason people want to kill other people is usually ignorance, not knowledge. So your university...
I'm thinking of actually. Well, I'm grateful as always, May, for your beautiful words. You're breaking up a bit in my ear, at least. So let me take the opportunity to say that I am thinking about a Galloway Global University. It would have to be online, of course, although there might be some scope in various countries of having some sessions because of the reason you've just cited, and the reason that Jeffrey Sachs made abundantly clear in his contribution. And don't beat yourself up as an American, because things are not any better in the rest of Western countries. Ignorance is completely rife, and that ignorance begets violent crime. Serious violent crime committed by our governments, which depends on the ignorance of the people. So I am giving some thought to that. I may in the summer start with a college on media because I didn't go to university, because I'm not a professor. I just think that maybe I'm in quite a good position to be a professor for those who've never had a professor, if that makes any sense. Thank you, May. As always, I need to squeeze in a big thanks to some of tonight's top Moats supporters who've been backing the program through the website. Janine Fidament, Sarah Durand, Harry Beveridge, Momosi Omulu, and John Daher. A big thanks to you for your generosity. And if you want to join them and give your support to keep this show on the road and to keep it independent, then please go to moats.tv at the end of this show and click the Donate Now button anywhere on the site, and give whatever you can in whatever denomination in whatever currency, one-off or recurring. I've got to make time for a legend. It's Erebos in New York. Iran as the Soviet Union 2.0. Erebos, I'm all ears.
Salubrious salutations and fidelitous facilitations to Clan Galloway, the mighty Moats staff, Chaya, first of her name, well planted in life, and of course the Moats supporters, as you just said, is an excellent segue, without whom of which all of this would be either not possible or difficult into the extreme. You know, that long-form interview with Professor Sachs was very informative, and it also segues with what I'd like to say. But before I do that, I want to shout out the Workers' Party, because in the final analysis, talk is just talk. Talk is cheap, you know, and it's actions, you know, as you would say, to sort of paraphrase something you've said, the protests, live stream, social media noise, you know, those things are necessary, but they're light years away from being sufficient. You need people on the ground, and you need a place for them to go. And so much power to the Workers' Party, and I'm putting my energy from across the seas to them. To mention something, I think Iran is going to wind up, they're in the process of drafting both Russia and China, because the Soviet Union, as I've said before, but I'll say it again, the risk of being redundant, despite their many shorts and their many problems, one thing was absolutely clear to the hegemonic colonialists. You know, if you touch one of us, you touch all of us, right? And they were very active, as you would know, because you was on the ground, maybe not pre-revolutionary Cuba, but definitely post, and in South Africa, and throughout different parts of Africa. The Soviet Union sent money, bullets, food, you know, supplies, whatever it is they had to send to the Vietnamese, to anyone who's willing to fight against the colonialists. And that's what we're missing in this world. And so I think Iran is going to have like for instance, if the people of the UK drafted you to be, you know, the honorable prime minister, you know, George the Great, first of his name, I could see King Charles III having a hard time just reading that from the rolled up scrolls, the parchment paper. You know, he would choke on himself. But people can draft you to be prime minister if they were really serious about it. So I think Iran is going to put China and Russia, who never sent, and you were the first person, only you and Scott Ritter said this, that they never sent a hospital ship. Forget about firing a slingshot or even spitting in the direction of the Zionist terrorist occupation colony, #ZTOC, Israel. They no aggression whatsoever, not cutting off trade, just sending a hospital ship. And you have people like Thiago Avila and them getting punished and beaten and tortured, risking themselves on skiffs, on fishing boats, and mighty China and Russia couldn't send a hospital ship. But I think Iran is going to say, look, this is what's going to happen. If you don't come and play your part and act like a responsible, mature superpower, then you're going to get eaten. You know, we're going to fight to the death, but you're going to get eaten because you're going to compromise. And I think Iran is going to be the head of this new, like Persian Islamic Republic, you know, bloc or whatever it is they're going to call it. Because BRICS is an economic thing, and the SCO is just like the VIP of a very nice club. You know, it's just a money thing. They have no kind of mutual defense. So more power to Moats, more power to Clan Galloway, and you absolutely deserve all the success and all the praise, and more power to Clan Galloway. Thank you.
Well, God bless you, Robos. That was a very powerful and in parts provocative contribution, the more powerful being delivered in your wise and powerful voice, your stentorian style. I can't agree with all of it, though I agree with much of it. And perhaps it's best just for me to say Russia is not the Soviet Union. And China is not the China it will one day be. or at least people like you and I hope that it will be. And that there's not a day goes by when I don't regret and lament the passing of the USSR. And we'd have a very, very different world today if it had not passed. Unfortunately, we're reaching the end of the show, and we still haven't heard from the thin lady. You know, they always say it's not over till the fat lady sings. Nobody in their right mind could imagine that Gayatri is a fat lady, but she is a lady that has to sing before this show can be brought to a close. So, here's the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, congratulations. Today is World Press Freedom Day, a reminder that journalism is not a crime. Notabene, Julian Assange, who was incarcerated for a total of 12 years, including 5 of which amongst terrorists and mass murderers at Belmarsh prison, a reminder that it's the duty of governments to uphold their respect for their citizens to express freedom of expression. Should I say more on that? Well, never elected president of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, wants to share with us that freedom of the press is one of the cornerstones of democracy, and the EU protects what matters, including the right to receive independent, reliable information. She ends, today on World Press Freedom Day, we reaffirm our duty to support and protect journalists so they can do their work free from pressure, intimidation, or harm. End quote. Well, thank you so much for reassuring us of this freedom, Ursula. See, my father was a journalist covering conflict areas, so this field is very important to me. So thank you for reaffirming that. In response to that, I want to dedicate this show today to the 262 journalists killed by Israel since October 2023. 50 were abducted and still detained, and 3 missing altogether. It's a very clear and systematic policy to aim at the press and with that silence the voice of and for Palestine, and causing the bloodiest episode of murdering journalists in modern history. It has killed more journalists than the US Civil War, World War I and II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, Cambodia and Laos included, by the way, the Yugoslavian War, and post 9/11 Afghanistan War altogether. So that is not, these are not my words, they come from a report from Brown University. So with that, this show is dedicated to the real journalist covering Palestine, and for that, Hind Rajab, whose birthday it is today and would have turned 8 years old.
Wow, what a powerful ending. I didn't know either of those auspicious days, and I hear what you say about the massacre of children and journalists, broadcasters in other countries. But of course you could have been even harsher and reminded her of our own fate. What are we in exile for, if not because information and free expression and unleashed journalism were not actually treated as a crime? It is treated as a crime. I could give you a list of journalists as long as my arm in Western countries, in European countries, who have been taken off airplanes in handcuffs, who have been treated as terrorists. Journalism's not a crime? Seriously? Julian Assange? Anyone? Me and Gayatri? Kit Clarenberg? Craig Murray? And so many others. We've been witch hunted under terrorism legislation only for journalism. What do? All we do is talk and give our honest view of things. And we end up in front of armed goons of Keir Starmer and von der Leyen and the rest. And you hypocrites have got the nerve to celebrate Press Freedom Day? Oh, goodness gracious. You've got my blood boiling. Thanks, Gayatri. I have to, in closing the show, make sure that you download the Moat podcast, which is published tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Tonight, we are rated in the top 10 political podcasts. Listen to this. In Botswana, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, and Montenegro. And we're in the top 30 for politics in Kuwait, Indonesia, Venezuela, and Uruguay. A wonderful span of the horizon, which this show has been, actually. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it and presenting it. And I hope you'll join me live on Wednesday for the midweek mother of all talk shows, on the eve of the British elections. I won't say too much, but I wish I could be with my friends on polling day, because I think they're going to have a wonderful day. It's been marvelous. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.